Hello and welcome to this political forum of the Carver Community Access Television. We're speaking from the CCAT studios in Carver. My name is Charles Mathewson. I'm a reporter with WATD. I will be moderating tonight's discussion. First up, Selectmen for a 3-year term. We have the incumbent, Dick Ward, earned a BA in education. He taught for 31 years in Carver and Plymouth. He's married with 5 children and a parcel of grandchildren. He's served on the Board of Selectmen twice. He's a former moderator. He's challenged by Paul Johnson, who earned a BS in industrial engineering, works as a manufacturing manager, is married with 2 grown sons, served on 4 boards. He's currently the chairman of the North Carver Water District Commission. We will begin with each candidate giving an introductory statement. We chose by random earlier, and Mr. Ward, go right ahead.
Thank you to both WATD and sponsor tonight, CCATV, and Mr. Mathewson. Thank you. My name is Dick Ward, and I have been one of the selectmen in Carver for the last 6 years. As Mr. Mathewson said, I went to UMass Amherst. I graduated from Silver Lake Regional High School. My wife Judy and I have lived here in Carver since 1964. Our 5 children and our 4 grandchildren who live in town all grew up here and were educated in Carver. In the 60s and 70s, I was involved with many community activities, including sports, government, and I was a selectman at that time also, chairman as well. As your selectman over the last 6 years, I have served on many committees and subcommittees. This experience helped me to work better as your selectman. There has been a lot of criticism about how our town has been run over the past 6 years. I am very proud of how we have come through this period of recession. The Boston Globe published a report from the Mass Department of Revenue in January, on the 27th of January, 2013, this year, that stated Carver has increased taxes less than 48 other towns of the 49 towns that were in the study in Eastern Mass. Our budget process has been very conservative. Our education here in Carver is excellent, but our buildings are rapidly deteriorating. And if we aren't proactive, our children's education will also deteriorate. We must get back into the Mass School Building Authority's pipeline for funding. Everyone is concerned with our kids' education. Yet because we could not come together as a unified group, we have already lost at least 10% reimbursement. Let's not lose it again. As your selectman, I will work towards improved transparency, bring honesty, integrity, and respect for the citizens and employees of our town. I hope I can have your vote on Election Day, Saturday, April 27th, 2013. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. And Paul?
Thank you, Charlie, and good evening, Dick. And thanks to the staffs of WATD and Carver Access Television for providing us the opportunity to discuss the issues facing our town. I'm here to present my case to you, the voters, and to ask for your vote on April 27th. Carver faces some very difficult financial decisions in the next 3 years. I've been out knocking on doors and speaking with and listening to the voters of Carver. Our children and our taxpayers deserve better than a choice between a third world school or an oppressive tax rate. We can't afford to wait another day to begin the difficult process of rebuilding our schools and of solving our $56 million unfunded pension and healthcare liabilities. Solving these problems must be the top priority for your next selectman. Politicians love to talk, but listening is a far more important skill. As a North Carver Water Commissioner, I listened with an open mind to the residents of the Water District during the hearings on their betterments. When they proved their case, I voted to remove their charges, even though it made my job of financing the district more difficult. As your selectman, I'll listen to both sides of every issue, because every citizen owns an equal share of our democracy. I'll always vote in the best interest of the most important special interest there is, you.
Okay, let's begin with a couple of what I'd consider warm-up questions. Dick, you're running on the phrase progressive and affordable. What does that mean?
Progressive meaning that I want to progress on some of the most important issues, and the most important issue is the elementary school right now. And so a pressing issue, that's the one. That's primarily, and we need to move forward first with the School Building Assistance Authority. Then we need to put together a financial package after knowing what maybe the state will help us with reimbursements. What was the second part, Charlie?
Affordable.
Affordable, yep. Affordable comes down to the fact that Carver has done very, very well over the last 6 years, my 6 years, on taxes. If you look at that study that was done by the Boston Globe, and it was numbers taken from DOR, and there were 49 towns in it, and we increased our tax rate less than 48 other towns. That's pretty astounding. We've done very well. So I'm saying that we should, at this point, be able to put together a plan to follow up on this school.
And Paul, you've got the word affordable, but not progressive.
I think that's an important difference between us, Charlie. You know, I stated in my opening remarks that listening is the most important skill. One of the things that I fault Dick for is not listening to the voters of Carver. Dick has only come very recently to the idea of keeping the growth of taxes in Carver low. Dick has voted for every single Proposition 2.5 override that's ever come before him. I, on the other hand, have a 15-year record of advocating for affordability. I was involved in the group that opposed the police and fire station override. Why? Not because I think our fire department does a poor job. I think our fire department does a great job. But I said back then that what we needed to do was we needed to understand the totality of our building needs. And what wasn't on the table back then was the needs of the public schools. We are not going to get a school building project unless it's affordable for the people of Carver. Nobody, to date, nobody has asked the people of Carver how much they're willing to tolerate in a tax increase to get that school. Now, I'm not opposed to all tax increases. I want to hear from the people of Carver. I hear from them when I'm out knocking on doors, when I'm out talking to them. And I'm not hearing a lot of people that can tolerate a huge tax increase in this time. 89 homes in Carver under foreclosure. We have to be careful of how we proceed. In order to make a school project successful, it has to be affordable.
Okay, Paul, you're a
Can I rebut that at all?
Sure.
Okay. First of all, we haven't had any overrides in my time of office. Okay? So I didn't vote against any overrides. All right? Paul has voted against pretty much every major financial issue that the town has wanted to take on. It was the school. 3 times he battled very strongly against it. Okay? The police fire station, which I understand could have gone either way, but also many of the other issues. This issue out on the solar project on Route 44, which was going to supply electricity to our water department, initially he voted against that. He voted against one of the agreements that was coming up for solar on that project. So as I go through, and I'm saying, I'm campaigning also, and I'm talking to people everywhere in our town. That's one of the things campaigns does for you. it allows you to hear people. They don't want to hear you just talk. They want to be able to talk, and they want to have you hear them. So,
when I covered this town for the Enterprise, I remember you as a critic of, and I have to say you have softened just a little bit here, and have, well, I don't know, how do you respond to that?
I think that's an easy one to respond to, because there's two parts of any human being. You have a heart and you have a head. You have to use both of those. I have a heart. I see what's going on at the public schools. I see shameful, deplorable conditions up there that should have been rectified, but couldn't be rectified because Dick and his group wouldn't moderate the tax increase. In fact, when 1,164 people voted against the override, Dick voted to revote it. I would never presume to revote a legitimate vote of the people of the town. What should have happened at that point is we should have stepped back and we should have said, what is it that the people are trying to say to us? Are they trying to say they don't want a school? I think the no people repeated over and over again that they're not against a school. They're against a tax increase that's going to crush them. Back in the 2000s, we had what was called tax shifting time, when the money that came from that was reduced from the levy from the growers was shifted dollar for dollar to the residential taxpayers. That's the backdrop in which we're competing in the town of Carver for tax dollars. Those people absorbed every dollar of that increase. That was a decision of the state, but it was also a decision of the town not to do any spending reductions or reduce the rate of growth. So I have a heart and I also have a head. When you have 89 people in town that are in foreclosure, it tells me that the people are not going to tolerate a huge tax increase. So that means we have to go back and we have to rework the financing, we have to rework the project until they can afford it. Because it's not my opinion or Dick's opinion that matters. It's the opinion of the people that vote in the elections.
I've seen the figure $150 on the average tax bill. Is that an acceptable increase? Dick?
Well, the school issue, when it first was voted, the school committee was totally in favor of it, and they asked us to put it back on the ballot. And I kept saying, you know, when people were saying from the opponents, they were saying, why don't you understand what no means? But all the time, the deterioration of the school was progressing. And so at what point do we say, well, let it go? We felt it was important to bring it back, especially with the school committee unanimously in favor of it. And so the selectmen voted to bring it back to the people. As far as the taxes involved, they projected that if we did a wraparound with the town hall and the library and then the new school and possibly using some money from the building stabilization fund, that it could be as low as $150 to build the school or as high as $300. But there is a point where a debt exclusion will probably have to be done, because you can't get the school for nothing. The taxes, and when tax money is coming in, if we're going to have to cut, now don't forget, teacher-wise in the schools, over the last 10 years, we went from 194 teachers down to 134 roughly now, okay? And when you start cutting 5 or 10 more, now you're bringing the pupils-teacher ratio down to an unmanageable situation. And so, you know, how do you say, oh, we're going to cut police, or we're going to cut? We did not think at that point that we should do that. We thought that what we should be doing is, when we had 2 people from the DPW retiring, that we would not rehire anybody in their place, and we would ask the department to cover the workload and keep going. And that's what we've been doing.
Paul, what's an acceptable tax increase to you?
An acceptable tax increase is a tax increase that the voters of Carver will vote on and say yes. Unfortunately, nobody's asked them. Dick is passionate about the conditions of the schools. I'm as passionate about the impact on our people. Dick voted. We had almost $700,000 in N-Star new growth a few years ago. Dick voted to put that into the budget rather than put it into the project. That's a difference between Dick Ward and myself. That money was found money. We didn't expect it. We hadn't budgeted for it. Yet we spent it on ongoing budgetary items. One of the things we spent it on was salaries. That new growth, that $700,000 in new growth, is now going to come back to us in additional unfunded pension liabilities. Because when you increase salaries, you also increase unfunded pension liabilities, which in the town of Carver total $56 million. That money belonged, Dick said that the school project was his top priority until it came time to vote on the N-Star money. And he voted to put that someplace other than the school project. It was priority one for me and a lot of the no voters to put it into the school project. There was no excuse for that money having gone anywhere but the school project.
Okay, let's take a turn into another area. How should selectmen find a new town administrator? Dick?
How should they, pardon?
How should selectmen find a new town administrator? A search committee, a headhunter? What would your preferred method be?
I definitely feel that if we lose Mr. LaFond, we should appoint a finding committee, search committee, and we may have to appoint somebody temporarily as an interim town administrator and try to get the person that does have the best of qualifications. And we will have to rewrite the job description a little bit and what we figure the pay range should be. And so to get somebody who's qualified or good quality person for that job, we're probably going to have to offer a fair salary range.
How do you keep politics out of the search committee process? Someone has to appoint these people. That's always the tricky thing with the search committee.
Well, the interesting part of this is going to be that usually the voting has been going 3-2 against me. So I'm going to try to encourage my fellow selectmen to say, look, we need to have somebody who's going to be able to do the job, who's qualified. You know, they need some municipal experience. They need to have a master's degree. That's part of the job description. So I'm saying we got to try to appoint a balanced search committee to do the job. And that will be tough, but that's what we got to strive for.
Paul, how would you go about it?
I don't have any problem with what Dick said about the process of going forward. The important thing is how is the type of person you end up with. And we need an independent person who's not into advocacy, that's into administration, that's willing to do what the Board of Selectmen wants them to do.
Okay. 18 months ago, October of 1911, the Department of Revenue gave the town, as they have many other towns, a financial review. They made 22 recommendations, very specific recommendations, beginning with in the finance department. What's happened in the 18 months? How many of these 22 recommendations have been implemented? And if they haven't, why not? We'll start with you, Dick.
Okay, we appointed an audit study committee. In the report, it requires or asks, describes how they recommend the audit committee be established. And they recommended financial officers from within the town and people that may be citizens at large that had financial background. So we appointed the chairman of the finance committee, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, the chairman of the capital outlay committee, 3 people that were involved very much with our financial part, and then some at-large citizens. Then it was brought to our attention that we have a bylaw in town that doesn't allow 2 of those 3 to be on that committee. So as we went into the new year in Selectmen, the new Board of Selectmen voted to disband that committee. Okay? That was back in November. So we asked for some applicants, and nothing happened until a couple of weeks ago. And then we had two people that I felt were involved politically in town, and I was concerned with how they would be going about this thing. And it is, no matter which side you're on, it would have made a political issue. So I asked the board to table it till after election, because we've gone a year and a half and nothing has moved on that whole report. And that alone is not what DOR wants. I mean, they do a report. They want us to evaluate it and proceed on it. And so, but at this point, now it becomes a political thing in the last 4 weeks before the election. So I felt, table it for those 4 weeks, then sit down the first meeting after the election and try to balance that committee a little bit so we can see implementing that report on a at least partly nonpartisan way.
Paul?
I think it's interesting. Dick sees things political when it's one way, but not political when it's the other. That entire audit committee, first of all, they didn't. Several members didn't get sworn in. There was internal bickering amongst the audit committee that was kind of unseemly. The whole thing has been a political football. Dick is right. It has been a political football. It continues to be a political football. The two members that they were speaking of appointing, Brian Lazon and Jim Grimes, both have extensive backgrounds in town government and have impeccable credentials. Selectman Maroney moved to take Dick's concerns into consideration and prohibit that committee from working until after the election, but to get the people in place to get a start on it. That was I thought, a very welcome thing to do in order to help take the politics out of it. Dick and Sarah Hewins, that wasn't good enough for them. They voted to obstruct that committee, the appointment of those people to the committee. That was wrong. It was just as wrong as what's been going on behind the scenes for years. In 2003, the audit report had a lot of the same things that you see in today's audit reports. Okay? The Treasurer Collector's office is understaffed, probably by about a half-time person. The present Treasurer Collector has been on record as asking for help for a very long time. They obstruct the help at town meeting and then complain about the results. You can't, it's like being for the school but against the funding for the school. When Dick voted against the NSTAR money, he's doing the same thing here. He's trying to have it both ways. You can't do that.
The first recommendation in this document, and I've seen it in virtually every other town that they've done this, is to replace an elected treasurer collector with an appointed finance director. Would you push for that, Paul? No,
absolutely not. Not in the town of Carver, not the way it's been going in the last several years, and I'll tell you why. Because the appointed positions that we get don't act autonomously. They act in concert with certain groups. If you could guarantee autonomy, yeah, I might be for that. Because to tell you the truth, if you look at the qualifications of an elected treasurer-collector, you could get somebody that's greatly unqualified. Somebody who doesn't have the education and work experience that's required. Our present treasurer-collector and the one before him, Steve Romano, were both qualified to do the job. I'm concerned that you could get somebody that is not qualified by education, by work experience, to handle the millions of dollars that we have going through the treasurer's collector's office. So we have to be careful how we structure things. If you could, for instance, that treasurer collector's office may be reported to the Department of Revenue, so it was independent, I might accept that. But if it reports locally, you're garnering too much control in the hands of too few people. That should concern any taxpayer.
In most towns, the finance director reports directly to the town manager or city manager or town administrator.
I rest my case.
Dick?
I believe that it should be a appointed position, because there again, as Paul pointed out, there you can ask or require certain qualifications and degrees, and you can make sure that you have a qualified person in that position, and the town accountant position, and the assistant position. Those, if they're under a director of finance that was directly responsible, not only to the town administrator, but to the Board of Selectmen, 5 people overseeing. The town fathers, whoever they may be, are really the folks that are acting on behalf of our town and the townspeople. So I think that if it were appointed, it would benefit the town, and then we guarantee that in an election we didn't have somebody, because we've had people run that really you question their qualifications. And if they were put into the position, that would create, I think, a problem.
Let's talk, Charlie, about internal controls. A fundamental principle of accounting is internal controls. You have to have checks and balances. In a system where an appointed treasurer-collector reports to a town administrator, and you have monies missing from the treasury for one reason or another, and this is not an academic exercise in the town of Carver. We had $17,000 missing from vacation and personal time that was paid to an individual. Who's going to be investigating that? How are you going to guarantee that that gets investigated vigorously, and that the expenditures of money for the town, you know, the trust of the people is upheld?
I said that happened years ago in Kingston when it was a clerk, treasurer, collector, and money went missing. The current, they have 2 positions, and they're both elected, and they're both very qualified individuals. But as Dick said a little while ago, that's just luck. You know, when you have a popularity contest to hire a professional, you may end up with someone who's going to not keep track of the money as closely as he or she should. Does that consideration soften either of your stands?
The people of Carver have basically the death penalty over the running of the treasurer collector's office. If they don't like what's going on, they can fix it. You know, I don't know of any better control. Certainly, you know, taking more control away from the people of the town isn't a good thing. I trust the people of Carver to make the right decision at the polls, even when I disagree.
Dick, do you want to respond?
Well, yeah, because having this position appointed, I said before, is going to require a certain level of qualifications. Okay, if there's a problem, and this happened with us on that money, the audits pick that up. They require the town manager and the selectmen to address it. In the situation that happened, we addressed it, but the man was poverty-stricken and passed away. And so it became a very difficult situation to get any money back. And that was the situation.
When you talk about calculating vacation and personal time, there's nothing very difficult about that. Everybody knows that, you know, every one of us, if you're short a penny in your paycheck, you know about it. When you get extra, you know about it. And nothing was done about that instance, and that's very troubling to me. That's a lot of money.
I may say one more thing, because this gentleman had great difficulty and was going through illness at the time. And shortly after that, he passed away. And he was not understanding what was going on. And so we tried to put a halt to it immediately. And shortly after that, we dismissed him and his assistant. And by the way, we replaced him with a part-time person to save money. But that's not the issue. The issue is that it was impossible at that point for us to retrieve that $14,000.
Let's not make this an issue about individuals, because it's not. What it is, it's an accounting issue that vacation and personal time are a straightforward calculation. You either took them or you didn't. You either have the documentation or you don't. And a town accountant that attacks a treasurer collector because he's short on a few short on a few cash reconciliations here or there, can't turn around and overpay somebody $17,000 and get away without being criticized. It's not reasonable, Dick.
Where are we going here? Are we going at the past town accountant, or are we talking about the situation with our director on Council for Aging?
Dick,
I would guess.
I'm saying
I would guess voters are wondering what's going to happen in the future.
I think what's going to happen in the future, and that's why you need internal controls. That's why you need, before you jump into an appointed treasurer collector, you need to know who he's reporting to. You need to know what controls the people of this town are going to have over that. And it can't always degenerate into every time somebody brings something up about something that's happened that's wrong, it gets into a finger pointing and you're calling this guy a bad guy or that guy a bad guy. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's an internal control issue. There was an overpayment of town funds that has yet to be explained.
Okay, let's move on. Voters will see on the ballot, April 27th, a question as to whether to reduce the Community Preservation Fund surtax from 3% to 1%. Paul, do you favor that reduction?
I favor that reduction at this time as part of a plan to get an affordable school project through. If reducing the CPA tax to 1% gets the voters to agree to take that project, I support it. I think the voters will support that. I think that's part of the solution. I would like to see it kept at 1% as a good faith effort to the people who support CPA, that you could bring it back later when it's affordable.
Dick?
I kind of am on the same lines. I've supported the CPA Act very strongly because they've done a lot of good things in our town, things right in the center of our town, building renovation and things that are a big part of our town center. But if the school hinges with our young people feeling that if we took that 3% to 1%, which might mean your total CPA tax on your house might be $90. And so if it was reduced $60 and there was $30 left as the 1%, and young people felt that that $60 they needed to have that and could contribute it to, if the tax rate has to go up with a debt exclusion for the school, say $200. If they could take that $60 and put it towards that and bring it down to $140, would that make them feel more comfortable? Yes, that's what I would support that. But remember, if we let that 3% go to less than 1%, we will not be able to meet our obligations like on the coal property, and I think we have a loan on the water system. Paul knows that better than I do because he's the water commissioner. But I do know we need to leave some money in that CPA account.
Charlie, I've asked that question myself, and I've been assured that at 1% it will leave it in. But Dick, I would support that as a caveat to that. It's existing obligations of the CPA program have to go forward. Treasurer Collector Franny indicates that we have the ability to add to the if we reduce it to 1%, we could add general fund revenues at town meeting if we wanted to get it up. I think that's a great way to get people to start to pay attention to spending, so that if they have other priorities and they want to bump the CPA up to 3% so they can get their state matching funds, and they do it under the levy limit, even somebody who's opposed CPA like myself can agree with that. That's a good thing.
Well, you both seem to be in agreement on that issue, but what if you find yourself in disagreement with the voters? I'll give you an example. Last spring in Norwell, Selectmen put an override on the budget for borrowing for the schools. That was approved. They made the same bargain. They said, we'll lower CPA to 1%, and voters said, no, we want to keep it at 3%. If that occurred in Carver, very different town, would you still try to get the CPA reduced, the surtax reduced to 1%, if voters said they want to keep it at 3%?
I'm against, I've stated that I don't question what the voters do at elections. If the voters choose, they've chosen. The game's over at that point. The decision has been made. And even if you disagree with it, you have an obligation as a public official to accept it and move on. That's what we should have done with the school project. When it was turned down, we should have modified, we should have worked on their concerns and gotten it passed.
Okay, another subject. Hingham residents have begun a discussion about withdrawing from Plymouth County government. Is county government still viable, in your opinion, Dick?
Well, I heard one of the county commissioners talk last Friday, and they're really trying to rejuvenate the county government program and parts of it that are beneficial to the towns. So at this point, I wouldn't want to withdraw from it. And I think in the future there may be benefits to it. And don't forget, county programs in other parts of the country are like a regional program for many towns. And we, with the cost of things going up, we will have to be looking at different configurations on regionalizing in departments in our town with other towns.
We applied through through Plymouth County for the RZEB Economic Recovery Zone bonds for the district. I don't have a big interest at this point in time in things like reducing county government. We have bigger problems right here in Carver that we need to concentrate on. We need to focus. We need to go after our big ticket problems, and we need to let the peripheral issues go aside so that we can make some progress. We need to make progress on the schools, and if contributing to a discussion on the Plymouth County, the status of Plymouth County government gets in the way of that, then I wouldn't want it brought up.
In the news today, do you support the solar project off Purchase Street? Paul?
Do I support this? No, I voted against it, and I'll tell you why I voted against it. The savings that was calculated for that was projected to be between $5,000 and $70,000 over 20 years. We spent $200,000 in state and local subsidies, not local, state and federal subsidies on that project for something that's not guaranteed to save a lot of money. Is it a big deal? No, because it probably won't cost us money. It could. We could wind up owning it. One of the things that I did as a water commissioner was insisted that it be a turnkey project. And you see the wisdom of that decision when we had the vandalism when it first started up. All we had to do was pick up the phone and tell them to fix their project. Whether or not that makes sense in the long term to save $60,000, which is what they projected over 20 years, really isn't a project that's worthy of a lot of time for people when you have the kind of big ticket problems in the schools that we have. So I voted against it because I didn't think it was cost justified. Waterline, the original financial backer, backed out as well. They had the same concerns that I did.
Dick, solar off Purchase Street?
Can I make a comment about the one on 44?
Yeah, sure.
I was very in favor of that. It is going to save money. We don't know exactly how much, but the chances of not saving money is far less than what it could do for us. I went to Boston. I went to Senator Pacheco's office to fight for that. We asked him to go to the state DPW to allow us to put it there. So I've been very much involved in that. The project over on Purchase Street, I voted against. I mean, we didn't really vote, the selectmen, because that was a planning board project. And so they had a big hearing, and I did sit in the back on that hearing. And I had looked at the plans, and I really couldn't believe what I was seeing, because that plan was on 6 acres, okay? And the property line between 3 of those houses was 75 feet from their back step. And I looked at it and I said, we can't, because their plans for the solar panels and fences were like another 20 feet, 25 feet. So if you put that together, you're talking about 100 feet away from their houses, the panels were going to be. So I said I wouldn't vote for that if it was something I had to vote for. And then later, we adopted a solar bylaw in town, and that requires a 200-foot buffer. So that's 6 acres that's in that parcel. There wouldn't have been, if you put 200 feet from the property line all the way around, there would not been room for one panel.
You want to say something, Paul?
Yeah, I sure do. Dick Ward has been instrumental in pushing solar projects in the town of Carver for a very long time. He was instrumental in pushing the 44 project. Didn't save us a lot of money. The Purchase Street project is grandfathered in. That should never have been approved. Solar projects.
By grandfathered in, you mean the 200-foot buffer would not apply to that particular
Was
project?
grandfathered in under the old bylaw, which basically was silent. If you look at the zoning bylaws, there is nothing in the zoning bylaws in the town of Carver that applies to it. So you go to the state bylaws, and the state bylaw says you cannot unreasonably restrict solar. There's no unreasonable restrictions in keeping a solar industrial project out of a residential neighborhood. That neighborhood is very close to my home. If they put that in the back of my house, I would be every bit as upset as the other people are up there. They've basically destroyed people's homes. Eric Tobolsky has had his foundation cracked. These people have solar right up to their back door. Dick was the one who took the overlay map at town meeting and basically made a motion to get rid of it. I stood up and I argued, along with Bob Belbin, for an overlay map that would allow us to go slow with solar projects, keep it in the southern part of the town, till we could prove that the new bylaw works. We don't know that the new bylaw is going to work. Dick wants to put solar on his farm. I'll bet you Dick is not going to locate that property anywhere near his home, like other people are at risk for in the town of Carver. We have to keep the very basic fundamental purpose of zoning is to keep and separate industrial use from residential use and commercial and industrial separate. We should have sided with the residents on that. It finally gets stopped. It's probably too late. We're going to cost us a lot of money that shouldn't have had to been spent.
Dick, do you wet pick or dry pick?
I used to dry pick always. Now I'm getting a little old to be chucking the bags all the time, so we're water picking.
Okay.
But
So solar-powered cranberries, is that?
I have no intentions of putting solar in. I brought my example, my own 50 acres up, as an example to try to point things out to people, and I got booed. If you went to the hearing on this, the people up there are saying, we're not opposed to solar in town, just this project, and I agree. Now, the overlay map that the Solar Bylaw Committee brought in was prejudiced to one end of town. We couldn't, that probably would get thrown out of the Attorney General's office when they reviewed that solar bylaw. So we excluded it as amendment at town meeting. I just made the recommendation. I do think that solar can benefit our town, but it has to be with those protective bylaws and setbacks and vegetative setbacks. And a 200-foot buffer on any, if you take those houses and you go 75 feet to the lot line, and then you add 200 more feet, that's almost a football field, and it has to have trees and vegetation on it. So there's a lot of protection in that bylaw. And there's no bending that bylaw. That's in place. We were told by an attorney that the only way that you could stop a solar project from being plugged into NSTAR was to have a town bylaw regulating it, and that's what we've done.
Okay, Paul, you're a long-term critic of Carver town government. As I said, when I was covering the town for the Enterprise some years ago, you were quite vocal, you and your compadres. What's caused you now to finally run for selectman?
Charlie, you know, what some people see as being a vocal critic and being passionate about what you believe. A lot of what I've been advocating for has been proven to be true. You know, back when the cranberry valuations were reduced back in 2000, and that tax burden was shifted to the residents, you start to see now that was the seeds of the division that are amongst us in the town. Our town government wasn't listening. So what happened is the residents had to ratchet up the volume a little bit. I saw things like the coal property. CPA was going to contribute $1 million to the Cole property. They were going to do it in $100,000 increments over 10 years. That ignored the interest carrying cost on the bond. That interest carrying cost, I submitted a CPA project to pick that up. It was $255,810 in savings. So you can, people can say that I'm a critic, but I'm a critic that's offered solutions. When the North Carver Water District was put in, I stepped up. I stepped up to get on the board. Dick voted against putting me on the board. I wonder if he'd like to have that vote back, because I've provided direction to the North Carver Water District. I've provided ideas, and a lot of them. When we faced a deficit, rather than have the general fund taxpayers pick up that deficit, all of it, I reached out to see if we could find new sources of revenue. And we found out that Deacon's Cranberry was buying water outside the district. We're now negotiating an agreement with them that's going to bring between $40,000 and $80,000 worth of non-tax revenue into the district. That means that our general fund taxpayers, the average Joe on Main Street, isn't going to be paying that. So judge me by what I've done positively for the town of Carver, and there's been a lot of it. I've set open meeting, public records law precedents for the entire state. I'm proud of those things. I'm proud that not only do I criticize, but I stand up and offer solutions.
So why are you running for selectman now?
I'm running for selectman because I believe there's a better way forward. The way forward is the affordable way. The way forward is to listen to people. When people speak out in an election and say that they don't want an override for a school, you have to listen. You have to address their concerns. If you don't, what happens is you wind up with no school. I think we can get a school. I think we're going to have to listen to Steve Pratt, Dan Ryan, Paul Duff, Roger Shores. They had some great ideas last time. We shouldn't have rejected their solutions out of hand.
Hey, Dick, when you're running for re-election...
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Paul is the founder of fixcarver.com. On fixcarver.com, for many years, he had my picture with a turban and a beard as if I were a terrorist. He's had a picture on there, the introductory picture to that website that says, instead of saying Carver Town Hall, it says Carver Clown Hall. I consider this to have been disrespectful to our town, to the people, and at many times they ridiculed me. It wasn't criticism. I take criticism. But when you ridicule me, and there were people on there ridiculing, and this is something that I consider Paul should have had a handle on, okay, that I have not taken that lightly. Now, as far as the Building Study Committee, I think that this group of people is a group that we need to sit down and listen to in this process of trying to go forward with the school. Let's get the school into that pipeline by the Mass School Building Assistance Authority first, find out how much money they're going to help us with, and then do it.
Do you agree with him that he has done a couple positive things for the community?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But so have I.
Yes. So that's my question to you. When you're running for re-election, there's really one core question you have to answer to the voters. Why do you deserve another term?
Because it'd be hard for me to list all 6 things, all 6 years of things that I've worked towards. But I've done a lot of things. If you go back to my first few months, we had a group of people who were upset with the animal inspector. And we wanted a new animal building for our animals, dog office and such. And so I went to Lakeville to find out what we were doing presently, because we didn't have an animal shelter. Okay? They were doing an outstanding job. It was costing us a little more than $1,000 a year to house animals there. Okay? So I came back and I said that at this time, it would be foolish for us to go out and have to spend $300,000 or $400,000 or more to put an animal shelter up. And we've been doing that regional concept since, and it works. It saves us money. So I have a whole, if you want me to go through I didn't make a list of all the things, but I've worked hard for our town. I've been responsive to citizens and young people and older people as well. I worked on the Plymouth Airport Advisory Committee when Plymouth, the commissioners were planning to put another 1,000 feet onto the north-south runway, which would have taken it right down into Vaughan Estates and South Meadow Village. And there were 2 other people with me on that. And we sat on that committee for a year, a group. And finally, they came to the conclusion that it would work okay and we could redistribute traffic if we made that the same and had a little overrun and then run the other strip east-west and add 1,000 feet to that, so that depending on the wind and whatever, you could bring a plane in and take a plane off and reduce a little of the traffic into the Carver end. So those are the kinds of things I've been involved with ongoing for the 6 years.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you all of the other questions I have for you another time.
We got going, huh?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's good. So, closing statements. Paul goes first because he went second in the opening.
Thanks again, Charlie. Rich Goulart and the staff of CCATV, who always does a great job. We love you. You have 2 important choices regarding affordability in this election. My opponent has a record of supporting every tax increase in almost every spending program that's come before him as selectman. He supports industrial solar projects in residential zones. He's not listening to you in taxes or on the placement of industrial solar projects in your neighborhoods. On the issue of affordability in taxes, I have a 15-year record of advocating for your interests, and I oppose solar projects in residential areas. I don't oppose all solar. I supported the Ravenbrook project and wrote a letter to the editor in the Carver Reporter because it's properly financed, it's properly cited, and it's good for the town of Carver. In 2009, you voted to elect me to the Water Commission. I've worked with everyone in sight, including the Selectmen, the Finance Committee, Town Planner Jack Hunter, Town Administrator Rick LaFawn, to make this project a success. We're not there yet, but we have a direction and a path to success that wouldn't be possible without my leadership. I'll listen to both sides on the school project, and I'll bring my experience with the Water Commission District to break the gridlock we face on the school project. The next decision regarding affordability is yours. Local elections are where you have the maximum influence. You can choose the affordable path forward by voting. What I promise in return for your vote is my best effort to represent you and no one else. You can make a difference on April 27th by casting your vote for Paul Johnson, the candidate of affordability for Selectmen. Thank you.
In summary, our education here in Carver is excellent. Our buildings are deteriorating, and if we don't do something, our education will also deteriorate. Our emergency management medical services are outstanding. They have a fast response time, and they don't cost the town any money. Our police department has been running well. The chief has been doing an excellent job, and we haven't had a lot of controversy. However, we do need to increase staff to the police department. You don't have to look far to realize that the drug problem and related crime has increased dramatically throughout southeastern Mass. The fire department, as every community on the South Shore knows, is outstanding. We pay less for this service than any other community in the area. If you drive through any of the surrounding towns, especially after a storm, you'll realize that the DPW has been doing outstanding work. The recreation and youth sports facilities in our area must be addressed and upgraded. The fields and courts have to get to the point where they match with the needs of our sports groups. The town hall, library, town council on aging, ground staff are on minimal budgets and reduced hours. Yet they are doing so to the best they can with what they have. I would like to cover all the departments in detail, but there isn't time enough. There is good work being done efficiently through our town. Any further severe cuts will jeopardize both our schools and our general government. Through the past 6 years, our town has had a balanced budget, a high bond rating, and almost $1 million in the stabilization fund. We have been very responsible about spending money. My concern for us all to be able to live in Carver, raise our families, live in retirement, and have a good quality life is important. I ask for your vote and support on Election Day, April 27th, 2013. Thank you, Dick Ward.
And thanks for joining us in this political forum. And don't forget, if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. The polls open Saturday, April 27th at 8 a.m. and close at 6 p.m. For WATD 95.9 FM and CCAT, this is Charles Mathewson. Good night.
Taking a picture based, it's all based on what we just did.